topic is idleness. You know, there's a lot of idleness in our society today. I don't know if y'all noticed that or not, but there's a lot of idle people, especially if you ever have to get something done. Go out here and try to find somebody that does carpentry work or plumbing or any of that kind of stuff. It's a little bit hard. There's a lot of idleness, you know, just flat out laziness for people today. A lot of people don't work much no more. All right, I know that y'all have noticed that in our society today, it's become a habit for people not to actually work. If they can get out of it, like we're seeing more and more of the fact that when the COVID hit, that so many people went home and never did go back because they didn't want to go back to work. Thousands of people. So I began to think about how lazy people was because I needed some stuff done, and I was talking to somebody about it, and they said, good luck. And so, you know, people just don't work much no more. So I said, well, the Bible talks a little bit about that. In fact, it gives us a good example of things in the Bible that pushes us in the direction of knowing that God expects us to work. If a man won't work, y'all know what the other part of that is? Neither shall he eat. And if we really and truly held to that, we'd have a lot of hungry people out there because a lot of people will not work. So tonight we're going to investigate we're going to be in the book of Proverbs. So everybody just turn your Bible over to the book of Proverbs. We're going to be there for several verses of Scripture. But we have some examples of things that really and truly are motivational when it comes down to what the Bible teaches about being idle. And that's what the title of this is, idleness. If you'll turn to Proverbs chapter 6, this will be verse number 6, verse number 9, and verse number 10. We're going to look at an example here. Bruce, we'll start with you tonight. We're going to look at an example here and then talk about it, see what you think about it.
Go to the ant, thou sluggard, consider her ways and be wise. How long wilt thou sleep, O sluggard? When wilt thou arise out of thy sleep? Yet a little sleep, a little slumber, and a little folding of the hands to sleep.
Go ahead and read verse 11.
So shall thy poverty come as one that prevaileth, and thy want as an armed man.
Okay. Now, he says, go to the ant, thou sluggard. Now, why would the wise man in the book of Proverbs bring the ant out as an example? Anybody got any idea about that? He's always working. And the ant, when you think about an ant and what he's capable of, anybody ever saw a little old bitty ant and he's pulling a bug about four or five times bigger than he is? And he's moving that bug, you know, and he's pulling him, and he may move him from here to that door out yonder, you know. But an ant is a symbol of work, you know, because you can destroy an ant bed, and if you don't kill all the ants, what happens to it? He'll build it right back. So, you know, he said, go to the ant, thou sluggard. Now, the word sluggard, what do you suppose that means? Anybody got any idea? You may have one of those other translations. You may have a different word. Okay. Lazy? What?
A work hater.
A work hater, okay. There are a lot of people that don't like the idea of working. And, you know, and a lot of people go out of their way. They work harder to get out of work than they do to get into work. I mean, I'm serious with you. There are a lot of people out there that go out of their way, do a lot more work just to keep from working. And there are a lot of people out there like that. Our society, for some reason or another, you know, there have been jobs in my life that was pretty difficult. I don't know if any of y'all in this room has ever caught chickens before. Gary Anderson, you have. Well, I used to work with the Anderson family, and we caught chickens. You're talking about a job. I mean a job, you know. And you didn't work an hour and quit. You worked all night long. Gary can tell you about that. Sometime in the daylight. And when I was a little boy, Daddy, he believed that in order for you to have something, it wasn't like doling out and going to, you know, him just take his billfold out and give it to you. You go and you work and you earn it, you know. And it made me a better person, a work ethic. And that's the reason things have gone the way it has in my life, because I worked. And I did the same thing with my son, you know. The thing about it is, when you think about what we're talking about, how long without sleep, oh sluggard? Does anybody know anybody that has a habit of sleeping a little longer than they should? Used to be, we had a family over here. I ain't going to mention no names. But you could go over there in the middle of the day, they'd still be asleep. Never hit a lick at a snake. Like Daddy said, we all fed them, you know. Didn't follow the biblical teaching, if a man won't work, neither shall he eat. If you did what you're supposed to, that family would have starved to death. Because you could go over there in the middle of the day, they were still asleep. Right. It shouldn't be that you have to have somebody to watch over you to see if whether or not you work, you know. And, you know, there are a lot of people that really and truly on the job, if there's not a supervisor or a boss man there to watch, and as soon as that supervisor, that boss man leaves, what happens to them? A lot of them quit, don't they? So, you know, in all honesty, the Bible directs us toward understanding how important it is for us to be active and workers in the kingdom. And so, he said, so shall thy poverty come as one that travaileth, and thy want as an armed man. Now, I don't know too many people that ever really prospered in the way that they could when they decided they wasn't going to work. You know, now some people, they're fortunate enough that everything's given to them, but most of us are not that way. Most of us have a tendency to know that we have to work to obtain, to be able to gather the things that we need as far as necessity, food, shelter, and clothing. That's what we need, and that's what we have to work for. So the ant gives us a perspective here. It's like Alan said, the ant, it works constantly, and nobody has to oversee the ant, but the ant's going to work all the time. There's a lot of things about the Bible when it comes to idleness. Proverbs 12, verse number 24. We're going to read verse 24 and 27. Gabe, I'm going to come over to you on this one. This will be Proverbs 12, verse number 24 and verse number 27.
The hand of the diligent will rule, but the lazy man will be put to forced labor. You may read through 27?
Read 27, yeah.
Anxiety in the heart of man causes depression, but a good word makes it glad. The righteous should choose his friends carefully, for the way of the wicked leads them astray. The lazy man does not roast what he took in honey, but diligence is made flesh.
Okay. In the original text, the word slothful is mentioned. Gabe's reading, it means the same thing as what he just read, but he said that the hand of the diligent shall bear rule. Okay? And then he says, but the slothful shall be under tribute. And then he says, the slothful man roasteth not that which he took in honey. The slothful man. Now the word slothful, you know, I've used that before, and, you know, I'm trying to sort of make people think I was a little bit, I had a little bit of intellect, not much, and that's hard to do for me. But the word slothful, it means just emphatic, lazy. If you're slothful, you're going to be lazy, you know. And there are a lot of slothful people out there, you know. When it comes to the understanding of what he says here about the slothful, he said, the slothful man roasteth not that which he took in honey. You know, didn't make no effort, you know, and that's exactly what. But the understanding of the fact that the slothful man roasteth not which he took in honey, he's right, you know, there's a lot of people, and I don't know why this is, it just infuriates me, whenever somebody shoots a deer, and they cut a little old strip of meat about that long out of it and throw the rest of it out, throw it away, you know. Right below the house, it's always that way. Just come across the bridge there, there's 3 or 4 thrown out right there. Of course, I don't, you know, I can't hardly stand it. It bothers me because there's people out there that would eat those deer, you know, and enjoy it, you know, but they didn't do it. They went out and sniped him at night and cut a little strip out and throwed him out, you know. But we're talking about slothful, and we're talking about the sluggard, the one that just really and truly has made a spectacle. And the vast majority of our society today is that way. They're not, that people just don't work anymore. There's certain areas of jobs out there now, certain type jobs, you know. Try to find somebody that wants to go log for a while. You know, ain't too many people wants to do that. Try to find some people that wants to go catch chickens. Ain't nobody wants to do that no more. You know, it's just a hard matter. Now, Proverbs 13:4 gives us a little sense of that sluggard. Let's see, Steve, we're going to get you on this one. This is Proverbs 13:4.
The soul of the lazy man desires and has nothing, but the soul of the diligent shall be made rich.
I don't know how to be successful in life except to tell you that you have to work. You have to put forth an effort to be successful. That's the way it works, ain't it, Joe? You have to put forth an effort. And when you think about the biblical principle of this, the soul of the sluggard desireth and hath nothing. Well, in our society today, those of us who work are penalized because we have to give to those that don't work. Have y'all figured that out yet? You know, that's the way this works in our society. You know, we have to work for ourselves, but we have to work to feed those that won't work. And that shouldn't be the way it works. That's not biblical. I said that to a man one time. I said, you know, this welfare stuff and all the stuff that's going on, that's not biblical. He said, what do you mean by that, preacher? I said, it ain't biblical. I said, we're supposed to work. The Bible says if a man won't work, neither shall he eat. He said, I don't know about that. I said, I do. That's what the book teaches. So, the soul of the sluggard desireth and hath nothing. And Steve was reading the latter part of that. The work brings about prosperity. There is a big difference between won't work and can't work. And, you know, we'll see that in just a few minutes in one of these passages that we're looking at. But, and you know, we're living in, we're very fortunate to live in America. But we're living in a society now, in my way of looking at it, where people have a tendency to feel like they're owed something. And none of us, really and truly, when we come into the world, we may be fortunate enough to somebody give us something along the way, but at the same time, we come into the world, we're supposed to start to work, to make it, to where we can be the one, you know, that fulfills the principle of work. Let's look at another one. In Proverbs 14:23, Proverbs 14:23. Terry, you want to read that?
In all labor there is profit, but the talk of the lips tendereth only to penury.
Okay. Now this, I like this one. They said, when I did this years ago, somebody made a comment about this, but that really stuck in my mind. In all labor there is profit. But then he says, but the talk of the lips tendeth only to penury. There's a lot of people that can talk about working, but they never really do it. A lot of people will emphasize, you know, yeah, people ought to work, but they won't work. You know, they'll talk about it. And he brings it to the forefront here. He said, in all labor there is profit, but the talk of lips tendeth only to penury. I don't know that you're ever going to be successful in every aspect of what we're talking about. With food, shelter, and clothing, he said, let us therewith be content. You know, most of us, we want beyond food, shelter, and clothing, but if we work, we can obtain food, shelter, and clothing. You know, that's what the Bible teaches. That's how we obtain food, shelter, and clothing. We have to have those things. Shelter to live in, food to eat, and clothing to wear. You know, but the honesty of what the Bible teaches, Proverbs 15:19 gives a little sense of direction here. We'll go back, Linda, in the very back.
The way of the slothful man is as a hedge on thorns, but the way of the righteous is made clean.
Okay? Concentrate on the way of the slothful man as a hedge of thorns. You know, if really and truly we did what we were supposed to do in our society today, and our government really worked the way it was supposed to work, this would hold true. The way of the slothful man is a hedge of thorns. That means that you couldn't prosper unless you put forth an effort and you worked, you know. But we were fortunate enough to live in a country where, you know, there's all kind of ways to get out of work and still obtain a living, you know. And it's because we live off of other people a lot of times. We live off of the backs of other people that actually did work, and the government took their money, and we all know how that works. But see, if you look at the Bible and you really and truly see the principle of what the Bible teaches, it teaches us that the way to success is through work. I mean, that's the way God intended it. But I do know this. Well, I'm going to get in trouble for saying this anyway. There's a lot of people that decide, I'm going to find me somebody that will help me, and I'm going to get on the check. And they're going to go find it and get disabled, and there ain't a thing in the world wrong with them. I mean, you know, guy up there above me, you know, he's been on disability for 15 years, but he roofs every day. Now, y'all tell me how that works. Y'all ever done any roofing? You know, it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. And you got to be pretty stout to tote shingles up the ladder and put them out on top of the house. But he's been on disability for 15 or 20 years, you know. But that's the way it works. But it won't work when you stand before God. I'll be honest with you. Look at Proverbs 18:9. This is one. Bobby, you got on your glasses. Hit that one for us.
He who is slothful in his work is a brother to him who is a great destroyer.
Okay. The translation I have says a great waster. His says great destroyer. He also that is slothful in his work is a brother to him that is a great destroyer or a great waster. And you know, that's true. That's all these verses of scripture that I dug out of this lesson. There's a lot of things about how things could work better for everybody if people really and truly understood the biblical principle of working for what you have. You know, and I don't know about y'all, but I appreciate something that I obtain so much more if I work for it. Do y'all believe that? Shelton, you shaking your head. That's a very good thought for all of us. If you can learn to appreciate it a great deal more if you have to work for it and obtain it. And you know, there's nothing wrong with accepting a gift, but if we can work for it, it should mean a great deal more to us because of what the Bible teaches. There's a lot of things about how the Bible teaches about not being idle, not being lazy and slothful. You would have a hard time right now in our society going out trying to find somebody that really and truly, you know, some of the jobs that really require a lot of work, those people are so far behind they can't catch up. Because if they really are a person that works, they got so much behind them and so much to do, it'd be hard to get them, you know, because they really and truly are working. And there's so much out there. Proverbs 19 and verse 15. Let's see, Sarah up front. Proverbs 19, verse 15. And you can read verse 24 too, Sarah.
Places cast one into a deep sleep, and an idle person will suffer hunger.
Verse 24 too.
A lazy man buries himself in a bowl, and will not so much as bring it into his house.
I used to laugh when I read this one. When you think about what she just read, slothfulness casteth us into a deep sleep, and an idle soul shall suffer hunger. Now, that don't always work in our society today. But the next part of that, in verse 24, said, a slothful man hideth his hand in his bosom, and will not so much as bring it to his mouth again. We used to tease about one particular fellow that really and truly, we always said his wife had to feed him because he was so sorry and lazy he wouldn't even feed himself. And you know, there are people out there, honestly, that absolutely will not go out of their way to do anything. You know, I mean, I'll use this as an example. Judy's sitting right over there, but you know, Miss Box and them, they raised a garden every year, and that's how they ate, and that's how we all ate when we went down there. The work in a garden. Any of y'all garden in the room? I know Alan does, George does. But you know, there's a lot of work in raising a garden. You know, working, and if you just can't go to the grocery store and go in there and pick it up, buy it, and carry it out and go ahead and eat it, there's a lot of work in raising a garden. You know, you're going to can everything, put things up, and all that stuff. And I've thought about it a lot of times, how that woman, you know, Miss Box, she fed all those kids, and half of the, you know, they still do. Half the country, and they work to do it because they raise a garden constantly every year, you know. And they would, just like George, you know, as old as he is, he's still raising a garden, you know. Now, he ain't got to eat, because I'm sure Adam will buy him a hamburger every once in a while. But in all honesty, he loves to raise the peas and the cantaloupes and the watermelon and stuff like that because he likes to work in his garden. And I thought about this. A slothful man hideth his hand in his bosom, and will not so much as bring it up to his mouth again. To me, that's kind of a humorous thought. But there's some people out there that way. I still drive through the drive-through, Al. No, I can't say that. I get, y'all know I'm a kept man. I mean, I don't do anything. Mine's sitting on the table when I get up, sitting on the table when I come in. I don't do anything. And I'm sorry to tell y'all that. You know, I still work, but I'm married to somebody that takes care of me. But anyway, Proverbs 20 and verse 4. It's going to use a word here. Shelton, you think you might could get that in for me? Proverbs 24, 20 and verse 4.
Not proud because of winter. He will beg during harvest and have nothing.
Okay, read verse 13 of that same chapter.
Do not love sleep, lest you come to poverty.
Okay. Now, he uses the word sluggard here in the King James Version, in the original text. He said, the sluggard will not plow by the reason of cold. Y'all ever known somebody that says it's too hot to work or it's too cold to work? People out there that way. You know, if it gets a little cold, it's too cold to work. And it gets a little hot, it's too hot to work. They never do find that middle ground. Never do go to work. But he says, he calls them a sluggard. Y'all know what a sluggard is? Anybody got any idea about that? It's a real lazy person. I think about a sluggard, you know, like a snail. Barely move. And if you don't mess with it, it won't move. It'll stay right there in that same spot. The sluggard. And then he talks about how it works. Love not sleep, lest thou come to poverty. You know, if people, there's not many people anymore. You know, used to, you have to get up 4 o'clock in the morning and drive 50 miles to get to work. You know, people don't do that no more. If they can't find a job right there at the house, they just don't do it. A lot of people just don't want to do it. But in all honesty, the Bible's very plain about how it works with us as Christians. We don't have any choice. We got to work. I mean, we got to do it, and we got to stay with it. And we can't be in the category where he says the sluggard will not plow by reason of the cold. You know, it can't get too cold, can't get too hot. Therefore shall he beg in the harvest and have nothing. Proverbs 21:25. Proverbs 21:25. Gary Anderson, can you read out of that?
The sluggard's craving will be the death of him, because his hands refuse to work. All day long he craves for more, but the righteous give without sparing.
Okay. Basically speaking, the desire of that slothful man, he says it killeth him, and he begged for more. For his hands refuse to labor. There's a lot of people that wants, but they're not willing to get out there and work for it, to get it, to obtain it. He coveteth greedily all the day long. You know, a lot of people, some people get mad at other people that prospers in life, never understanding how it was that they actually came to prosper. Y'all believe that? I mean, Bible study for me is everyday living. Y'all know that. Y'all been in my Bible study group so long. But everyday living is what I use the Bible for. You learn how to live your life every day through looking at what the Bible teaches. And in this particular passage, he said, the desire of the slothful killeth him, for his hands refuse to labor. There's people out there that complain and complain and complain about this, that, and the other, when they could get up, get off of it, and go to work and obtain it. And I admire people that obtain through work, through diligent work, without being slothful. He says his hands refuse to labor. I don't know about y'all, but there's people out there that we all know that just absolutely, used to be my grandpa would say he wouldn't hit at a snake if it was a biting at him. He always used that category. He said he's so lazy he wouldn't hit at a snake if it was a biting at him. And he was telling the truth. There's people out there that just absolutely, like he says, his hands refuse to labor, will not work. But I said something about her retiring. She'd been at the bank 52 years. The man at the bank that owns the bank, he said, you shut your mouth. He said, keep your mouth shut. He said, have you tried to find anybody to work lately? He said, don't you talk to her about retiring? If she ever comes home, they call before she gets in the house to make sure she's coming back. And I said, well, you got to think about it. The woman is 50-something. She's been there 50-something years. He said, I don't care. He said, they ain't nobody to work. What she does is process. And y'all know what a loan is. When she went to work, you got a postcard. And you signed your name, and they put the amount on there when she went to work at the bank. And that was a loan. Now then, a loan is this thick. It takes hours and hours and hours, and I don't know what you got to have in your head to make it happen. But he's like he said, don't you shut your mouth. Don't talk about retirement. So, I guess he's right. He said, if you tried to find anybody to work, ain't nobody wants to do that. They hire them Monday, and then by Friday they're gone. They say, I ain't going to do that. Alan knows about it. He's sort of in charge. He knows what people, they just won't work. Anyway, the Bible says, he coveteth greedily all the day long. Let's see if we can find another one or two right here. In Proverbs 23 and 21, now I always talk to people about the Bible teaching that drunkenness will clothe a man in rags and prosperity will never come to his door. But I want you to look at this one, and we're going to put the same principle to it. Proverbs 23:21. Nicole, you want to read that?
The drunkard and the glutton shall come to poverty, and drowsiness shall clothe a man with rags.
The drunkard and the glutton will come to poverty, and what did he say? The drowsiness. Drowsiness shall clothe a man with rags. What do you suppose drowsiness represents, y'all? Lazy. That's exactly right. Lazy. And I don't know how it is with most people today. We're not living the way they used to live years ago. People didn't have no choice. I had the opportunity to talk to my grandfather that went through the Depression, and he said many a time he fixed a car and worked on a car and stuff for a head of lettuce or a head of cabbage or some squash or some beans. People had a way to make a living, And he said, there wasn't no money. He said, I work on the car and fix it. And he said, I might get a head of cabbage or something out of the garden. He said, that's how they paid me. He said, but you know what? We didn't go hungry. And he was right. And when you think about this, drowsiness shall clothe a man in rags. Laziness, that's what and in our society it don't work that way no more. But with the biblical principle, it should work that way. Any thought? Huh? Yeah, they bartered. That's the way they made their living. That's the only way they could do it, you know. Wasn't no money. All right. Let's see here. I want to look at, we'll stay in Proverbs here for just a minute. In Proverbs 26, and I'm going to skip over a couple of these because I won't get to all of them. Proverbs 26 and verse number 15 and 16. We'll read them together. All right, Pam, I know you can read.
The slothful hideth his hands in his looks. It grieveth him to bring it again to his mouth. The sluggard is wiser in his own conceit than 7 men that can render a reason.
Okay, she's reading from the original text too, and listen to that last part of that. The sluggard's wiser in his own conceit than 7 men that can render a reason. Have you ever talked to somebody that really and truly wouldn't work and they had all kind of excuses as to why they couldn't? You know, I've often wondered how it was that, and in our society, and we're seeing it right now, thank God, and maybe God will keep shedding His graces on us, how it is that people have, over the years, taken advantage of us that work. You know, a lot of these people now that they get on disability when they're 18 years old, some of them 21, some of them 25, and never hit a lick at a snake, never work a day in their life, and we're working and we're paying that in, and they're drawing it out, you know. It has to do with the sluggard is wiser in his own conceit than 7 men that can render a reason. There's all kind of reasons as to why people ought to work, and there's a lot more than 7 out there, but the Bible gives us an understanding here about how it works. Any thoughts or comments about that? Well, it grieves him to bring his hand out of his bosom again, he says, and bring it back to his mouth. It's a sad day whenever it is that people reach a point in life that they just believe that the world owes them a living when it is that we have to work to obtain a living. Ecclesiastes 10 verse 18. I'm going to get in real trouble when I start talking about this one because I'm going to make some points about it. Joe, you want to read that for us?
Because of laziness the building decays, and through idleness of hands the house leaks.
Anybody ever known anybody that was so sorry that they wouldn't work and the house just fell in on them? I could give you some examples, you know, of people that really and truly would not even as much as fix a leak in the roof or do anything. Just let the house completely fall in. Or a lawnmower sitting in the garage because it was a push mower and the grass grows up to the window because it won't go push the mower. You know, I know people that way too. I know y'all don't know anybody like that, do you? There's people out there that will absolutely be so lazy that they just let the house completely fall in on them. Won't never repair anything, do anything to help themselves. And that's sad, but that's what the Bible, idleness, if y'all ever look, y'all take your Bible and go and look at the subtopics and all in the Bible and see what it says about it. But there's so much, I mean, there's no way I could get to all of it tonight, but there's so much in the Bible about how important it is for us to understand God didn't put us here to be slothful or lazy. He put us here to work and to get at it. And if we're going to obtain, we're going to have to work for it. Now, some people are lucky enough they don't never have to work for it. They just have it. You keep yourself a lot of times out of trouble. If you go out there and go to work, you don't have to sit around and think about things that's not good to think about. And a lot of times people don't, and I'll just make this point, people that really work hard to get somewhere to really work hard, I mean, there's physicians out there, and I know one in particular got the same last name as I got, work 90 hours a week, sometimes more than that. That's a lot of hours, you know. 7 days a week, call them in constantly, day and night, day and night. So it don't work. It don't matter. If you go into that type profession, you're going to work. You ain't gonna go into it and just sit down and draw a paycheck. That don't happen. You know, I worry about him sometimes because, you know, it's like he said, you know, you get home, you've been on the job for 16 hours, and then they call you, you're on call, and they call you back, and then you go back out and you work another 10 or 12 hours. No sleep, you know. So you got to understand the Bible's principle of how it teaches it. We have to work. The sluggard is wiser in his own conceit than 7 men that can render a reason as to why. Let's move on up a little bit. Matthew chapter 20. This is in the New Testament. There's a great deal of thought in this portion of the Bible. Kathy, you want to embark on that? Matthew 20, verse 6 and 7.
Okay. And about the 11th hour he went out and found others standing idle, and said unto them, Why stand here all the day idle? They say unto him, Because no man has hired us. And he said, Go ye also into the vineyard, and whatsoever is right, that shall ye receive.
I said, there's plenty enough jobs for everybody, and this guy says to me, well, it ain't what I want to do, you know. And you get thinking about it, you know, we do live in a society where we pretty much can pick what we want to do, but if we really and truly needed to eat or clothe ourselves or have a place to stay, I don't think it much matters what you have to do as long as you work, you know. Now, there's a lot of people that says, well, I said, some fellas wanting to know what he could do to find a job. I mentioned 2 or 3 things to him. He said, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. You know, we may not have a choice. You know, there's a lot of people out there that they build into themselves, well, I ain't going to work over here, you know. I think it was good recently that we see people out there that will, you know, if you want to work fast food, you know, work fast food. If you want to work something else, work something else, you know. And there's people out there that drive garbage trucks. They do pretty well. And people ride on the back and empty it sometimes. And that's the way it should work. That's the way my granddaddy thought too. Bless his heart. He said, you know, people would come by and say, do you have anything I can do? He said, yeah, you can change oil in that car right there. I said, I'll drain it and you put it back in. He said sometimes they would and sometimes they wouldn't. They didn't want to do it, especially if they didn't want to get their hands greasy or didn't want to get no oil on them or nothing like that, you know. But there's people out there that really and truly, there's jobs out there that, this fella on TV, y'all probably watched him, the dirty job guy, you know. Yeah. He goes and shows, you know, what some things that people do, and there's some people who'll take on anything to work and make a living and do pretty well at it. All right, let me see if I can get us down to where we need to quit tonight. Let's go to 2 Thessalonians. This is where we're going to look at 3 verses, and then we're going to call the dogs tonight. 2 Thessalonians 3, verse number 10. 2 Thessalonians 3, verse number 10. Linda, can you read that?
For even when we were with you, this we commended you, that if any would not work, neither should he eat.
What if we held to that, you know? If a man won't work, neither shall he eat. You know, that's what the Scripture says. Oh, man, I'm sorry about that, y'all. I apologize. Let me cut that thing off. I don't know why in the world that I didn't cut it off when I first come in, because Vicki didn't tell me. I know. I know. That's 4D marriage, y'all. I know it. I'm sorry about that. We looked at that. If any man won't work, neither shall he eat. The thought is conveyed there, you know. God expected us to work, to provide for ourselves, food, shelter, and clothing, and He expected that to happen. In verse number 11 of 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, let's see, Pam up front here, Pam Johnson.
For we hear that there are some which walk among you disorderly, working not at all, but are busybodies.
Anybody know anybody that's troublemakers because they just really won't work and they go about stirring up trouble all the time? If they'd get a job and go to work, they wouldn't be stirring up trouble all the time. There's some people that way. They just don't have any inkling as to what the Bible's teaching is on that matter. Some which walk among you disorderly, working not at all, but are busybodies. Some people cause problems because if they was working, they wouldn't have time to cause problems, and they wouldn't have the sense of direction to cause problems if they was working. You know, that just don't work. Let's get one more before we quit tonight. 1 Timothy 5, verse 13. 1 Timothy 5, verse number 13. Diane, can you read that?
And besides, they learn to be idle, wandering from house to house, and not only idle, but also gossips and busybodies, saying things which they ought not.
We're gonna quit with that one, but I want y'all to look at this verse and let's talk about it for just a minute. With all, they learn to be idle, wandering from house to house. And what are they doing? Tattlers, also busybodies, speaking things which they ought not. A lot of people cause lots of problems for other people because if they was working, they wouldn't be able to do it. They wouldn't be able to go out here and cause problems for other people. You know, everything I pull out of the Bible, I try to use for everyday living. And, you know, there are a lot of people, I've seen people in the middle of the day, you wonder, you know, they're out causing problems and stirring up trouble and all that stuff, and if they was working, that wouldn't be the problem. But there are a lot of people like that. They just will not concede to the fact that if they'd go and get busy and get a job and work, they wouldn't be causing problems for other people. Any thoughts or comments? What y'all think about the lesson? It's everyday living is what the Bible's filled with it. Joe and I were talking about it last night. But, you know, the Bible is filled with everything we need to learn how to live our lives and go to heaven when this life's over. And being idle and being lazy just won't get it, you know. I know some people, you know, that absolutely can't do it because they're not able, they're not capable. And that, I'm not talking about those kind of people, but there are a lot of people that are capable that just won't do it. They just won't work, you know. And if a man won't work, neither shall he eat. And if we held to that, there'd be a whole lot of folks out here looking for a job if they wouldn't eat.